Okay, so I have a new file. We're going to be creating this in a new file. So I can either go, for now, I will just go into my file, document settings, document setup. I want this to in feet and inches. And hit OK. And then my layer scale, I want it 1/4 inch. Hit OK. My drawing area, this is 11 by 17, so I can fit it on there. So I go to printer setup, page setup, and go tabloid, landscape, hit OK, hit OK. Everything else is good. So again, we're changing our drawing units to feet and inches, our layer scale to 1 to 48 or a 1/4 inch scale, and our drawing area to be tabloid and landscape orientation. I'm going to hit OK.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Where do you come up with the number 48?
So
it's 1/4 inch equals a foot, but how do you get 48 out of that?
I mean, it just does that conversion for us. So if I go drawing, like I didn't type in that 48, I went to document setup, change. I change, like if I change my scale to 1/8 of an inch, it's 1 to 96 or 1 to 100, right? So this is the metric equivalent basically. So 1/4 inch is 1 to 48, or if we were drawing in metric, we'd be using 1 to 50, right? So I just selected the imperial. It changes this paper scale to 1 to 48, and I can hit OK. And it does show up as 1 to 48 on the layer scale instead of a 1/4 inch, right?
It shows up as metric?
Right here it does, yeah, just the layer scale. So but I know, like if I went into there, I can see that it's a 1/4 inch to a foot. Okay, okay. So I'm going to draw this sample floor assembly. I'm going to use my line tools to do so. So my first line I'm going to draw, I'm just going to draw it at approximately 14 feet at 30 degrees and hit enter, enter. Now I'm going to have to choose what that's going to be so I can work both down and up. So if I want this to be, it's selected, I can Command D is duplicate. So if I look at my modify menu, there's multiple commands that we can do. If I look under my edit menu, there's Command D or duplicate, which is or Command D. So if I have my object selected and I want to duplicate this, I can just hit Command D. Now it doesn't look like anything happened because remember back when we set up our Vectorworks preferences, we unchecked this offset duplications. We did this so that when we duplicate our objects, they stay at that point of reference where we want to move our object from. So it doesn't look like I did anything, but if I move this line, I can see that my original object is there. Now, if I go back into my Vectorworks preferences and I set that to offset my duplications, I can hit OK. If I select this object, now if I hit Command D, I can see that it duplicates it, and it's visually apparent because it takes that duplicate and moves it off. The thing is now it's not from the point of reference of my original object. So then I actually have to move it back and go, now I want to move this. So my personal preference, you can decide how you choose to do it, but I like to offset my duplications or uncheck offset duplications. I select my object, I go Command D, and then I go Command M. So Command D is under the edit menu. Command M or move is under the modify menu. After I press my shortcut keys, I get this move selection dialog box. So you can see that this goes back to the original, our original discussion about the grids. So there's Cartesian grid and there's polar grid. We're working in isometric, so we're most likely going to use our polar. If we want to get into the calculations, we can figure out how many we're moving down and right or left. So I can move this object, my duplication, I can move it down. So I'll start this. My first line is going to be my top of my concrete or cinder blocks or CMUs. So I'm going to draw, my next line is going to be the next row of my CMUs. So I'm going to go, I don't want to go down 8 feet. I want to go down 8 inches. And in this case, I'm moving in the height. So I actually want to go down 90 degrees. So I'm moving vertically. So I'm going to move this line, this duplicate, 8 inches down 90 degrees and hit OK. I'm going to do a few more. So I can just go Command D, Command M. It takes me back into my dialog, my move selection. It keeps those previous values. It basically assumes that you will most likely want to move that object again that same distance. So I don't have to make any changes. I can just hit Enter or OK, and I have a next line. I'm going to do one more, Command D, Command M, Enter, and I have those lines. I'm going to draw my vertical line just so it's there. And now I want to draw some cinder blocks. So I'm going to draw a short segment of a line. That line after I've created it is highlighted and selected in my object info palette. I'm going to go Command M and I'm going to move it. This time I'm moving 16 inches and I'm going up and to the right. So this angle I'm actually going to move at is at 30 degrees and I can hit OK. I'm going to do a shortcut. I'm going to click Option, I don't want that line. I want this line. I'm going to click Option, drag that line down there and move that. This time I'm only going 8 inches because we're going to stagger our joints. And this one I can actually click Option, drag and move it down. I'm going to select both of these, or all 3 of them. And now I can go Command D, Command M, and I'm going to move that 16 inches again at the 30-degree angle. And I can see, and I can just quickly go through, and I have a whole bunch of cinder blocks. I can also select all of these and click Option, drag them. And that also completes it. So I am going up this time, so I'm going to duplicate Command D, Command M. I'm going to do my mud plate, so I'm going up 1.5 inches. Again, I'm going vertically, so I'm going this time in the positive direction, so I'm going at an angle of 90 degrees and hit Enter. Then I want to do my rim joist, so I'm going to duplicate move. This is the top of that, so I'm doing a 2x8, so it's going to be 7¼ inches. I'm going to go up again, so it's 90 degrees. So that's the top of the rim joist, and then I'm going to duplicate move that. Now I'm doing my plywood, so it's going to be 3/4 inch vertically up as well. And now when we if I want to duplicate my joists, so I added height because the plywood is on top. but that joist also has thickness. So if I select that line again, that top of that rim joist, I can duplicate and move. This time I'm creating thickness, so I'm actually moving in a horizontal direction. So I actually want to, the thickness I want to create is 1.5 inches. And this time I'm moving in a top left direction, so I'm actually moving at an angle of 150 degrees. So I can hit OK, and I can see then that that completes that joist. I can fix that. Oh, I moved it. So what I can do is I can option select those. Now I have this member that I've created using lines. I can multiple select them and I can duplicate move. This time I'm doing 16 inches on center. I'm still moving to the top left, so I want that 150 degree angle. And I can see that I've created another joist. So one way of doing that as well is going to be to group that member. Instead of having to select all those objects, I can just hit Command G, and under the modify menu I can see there's this group. So now all those lines are grouped together. I can still move them in the same way, but I don't have to worry about them coming apart or falling apart. Now the thing is, we are going to want to trim these objects, so I'm going to have to ungroup them anyways. If I want to ungroup a group, if Command G creates the group, Command U ungroups the group. So I can just go in and ungroup all those groups I just created, because we're gonna do some plywood.
Are you just hitting U and enter?
All I'm hitting is Command U. It automatically does that, whereas enter with our move command, we had to hit Command M and then set our lengths and angles and then hit enter to apply those. This is just a straight command. As soon as we hit Command U, it ungroups that group. As soon as we hit Command G, it groups that group. It's an instant command. Okay, so I want to draw as little as possible. So I've created these objects. I'm going to clean them up eventually. But basically, this whole part right here is a mirror image on this side. So I'm going to select, and I'm going to go and use my selection tool. And this time I'm going to use the polygon marquee mode because this is at an angle. So I'm going to use my polygon selection mode because I want to select all these objects. So it selects all these cinder blocks and I can see they're highlighted. If I go and I look in my basic tool palette, there's a mirror tool or shortcut equal sign. By selecting that, there's two mode menus. I can either duplicate and mirror, or I can just standard mirror, right? It automatically defaults to the duplicate mode. This mirror tool, what we're doing is we are creating the mirror or the plane that these objects that I've selected are going to mirror around. So I have these selected. Here's the mirror plane that I want to use. I already have a line there, so I can snap to that. And I can see that as I do so, I mean, if I'm skewed, it's a little off kilter there. But if I hold it vertically down or press shift, I can see that it creates these lines on the other side of my mirror face, basically. And all I have to do is complete that line or that face, and it mirrors those lines. So I don't have to redraw them, okay? So that was all using I just selected them. I went in and used the marquee or the polygon marquee mode so I could select on an angle. And really I could use, I want to use that one as well, mirror that.
Hey, Carmen, would you tweak the graphics here so the CMUs are staggered at the corner rather than symmetrical?
Right, you could. It's really the purpose is it doesn't need to be exact. It's to practice using those tools. So if you, in doing so, you're not using the mirror tool, I would prefer you to use the mirror tool because then you're getting to use and understand that tool. So that's kind of more important than having it structurally exact. Yeah. Okay. And it's creating that efficiency, right? So time is money. So the quicker we can do things, I was going to go over the shortcuts. The better it's going to be either for us or our employer, and ultimately us. So I have my sheet of plywood. Now we're going to kind of finish things off. So this line, I could mirror it or I can duplicate Command D, Command M. I'm going to go up 3/4 of an inch. And this time I'm going vertically, so it's going to be 90. Now what's happening here is we're getting some overlap because we're using lines. So there's no fill, so our fill isn't covering the objects that we've already created. So to clean this up, I can use this trim tool or Shift Option L. It's pretty simple. By clicking it, I'm going to trim the objects. It trims all the objects or only the selected ones. Right now I want to use the all. So I can just click and it highlights the object that is potentially going to be cut. And what happens is it trims the segment between intersecting objects. So if I undo that, I actually want to remove this section and this section, but this line intersects. So it removes this section first because that's between the two intersecting lines. And then I can remove this between the two intersecting lines. Okay, so I can go in and I can trim this. And there's multiple ways of doing this as well, but that is just one. So you can use your trim tool, which is Shift Option L. So I'm going to create my sheets of plywood. So I'm going to Command D, Command M. I want this to be 4 feet. And again, I'm going up and to the right. So I'm going 30 degrees and I can hit enter. So I can see here that I want to trim these lines. And actually before I do so, I'm going to duplicate, move again, another 4 feet. So if I go to my trim tool, I can go in and I can just remove these sections of lines. So I can see that sheet of plywood forming. Now, obviously, I'm going to want to do that there as well, and it can get quite tedious. So there's other ways of doing so. I can use, right below the trim tool is the clip tool or Option C. And what this does, you can see that there's these marquee modes. So we can draw a rectangular marquee, or we can draw a polygon marquee, or we can draw a circular marquee. So there's different ways we're going to want to select, create these marquees or grayed areas. So the first mode is it excludes, so everything within that marquee gets removed. The inclusion is the overlapping objects the objects outside of the marquee get removed. And the third option is that the objects get separated but not removed. So it will split objects, but it won't remove them for you. Because really right now, this is one object. So I could go into my clip tool or option C, and I can draw this. I'm going to use a polygon, and I'll show you the difference. So I'm going to use this line as a snapping reference, and I can go across and it removed the one I selected. I have to have the object selected, right? So I can go and okay, so I have those lines selected. Now if I go into my clip tool or option C, now I have to have them selected. I'm going to take it too far because it doesn't matter. And then I can see that it removes all of those pieces within that marquee that I created of the objects that I had selected. If I undo that, if I go the inclusion mode, we don't want that, but I will show you what happens. So it removes everything on either side of the marquee that I created. And then the split mode, I can see that all the objects are still there, but these lines that used to be one continuous line are now split. Does that make sense? I will go over another way of doing it, but right now, does everybody feel comfortable with duplicating and moving, using the trim tool, and using the clip tool?
Duplicating and moving the cinder blocks, how did you do an array of a bunch of them, or did you
No.
just do each one?